there was a technical difficulty. Oh yeah, there it is. Now it's recording. Yeah, I was saying that the first few years, probably the first 3 years that I did interviews, there were technical difficulties every time, almost every time. And one of them was a television studio. It was a TV show in the Seattle area, and they had a full studio. They had $1 million of equipment, and I logged on, and they were like, we're having some kind of technical difficulty. We've never had anything like this happen before. They have no idea what they were like. We might have to scrap the show. They got it sorted out, but I'm saying it was like it was a daisy chain. It happened all the time. At some point, it just quit. Like I still get a few little glitches here and there, but it's like they quit doing it.
At a certain point. I mean, they have to.
It was too late. Yeah.
Yield. But so yeah, I guess we should just start. So right, are you okay with that?
Yeah. Totally. Cool.
So yeah, welcome to a special edition of Saint Olga. We have a very long-awaited guest for me. Is of course Tony Rodrigues. His account is probably the most realistic and also as detailed as any others. And he acted as my personal introduction. His 2016 interviews, actually it was Laura Eisenhower, and then I discovered the other ones. And then because I'm aiming for this interview to be a sort of a sequel to the books, I recommend reading the books first. And so, yeah, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Sure.
Daniel, happy to be here. It's been a while. I'm working in other things right now, and I've been doing less and less interviews, so it's great to be back and have some interview time. Sure. I just think it's important. I just think that there's still the information of people being taken and living for 20 years and being put back, and then with the government working alongside extraterrestrials, agencies. I think that information came out gangbusters and they've really been trying to sweep it under the rug lately. And so it's just important that new people keep learning about it. The more, eventually there'll be a critical mass and they'll have to tell it. Actually, I'm hoping that we get some big events in 2024. We're sure to get some world events this coming year.
Yeah, I mean, it's due to burst any moment. I'm expecting as well. But since you mentioned 20 years and back, I should start with some obvious questions. Like, do you believe that it happens in the same timeline? So in other words, between 82 and 2002, you have two of you simultaneously.
Yes, I fully believe that I could have met myself. It was the same experience. The weather was the same. I went back and looked at days that I remembered being in places and looked at the weather records. Weather was the same. The music was the same. Movies on the television was the same. I'm unique in the fact that I spent the first 6 or 7 years or so on Earth and then was sold off into the secret space program, into the colonies in the solar system. And during that time on Earth, it really gives me the real backbone of evidence to support my testimony. And so many people just get whisked off into space in this, so they can't go to the same place that they remember and document it the way that I have. So, but yeah, I absolutely believe there were two of me simultaneously. And in fact, that's what it felt like when it began and when it ended. So when it was over, me in my organic timeline had this feeling of completion, like half of me had been diluted away from me mentally and emotionally. And for all those 20 years, and I struggled, and I was lesser of a mind than I was. And then when it was over, it's like I snapped out of it somehow. So there were two of me, and when the one ceased to exist, that energy went back into the original me, and I could feel it. It was something that I could feel, and something I see in a lot of other people that I work with who I suspect have been through the same thing.
Right. But do you figure there's the chance that you only felt that you were, let's say, a little lesser, a little divided because of the, dissociation induced? And could it possibly be that your consciousness would have been able to experience it normally without the torture?
No, well, so it's a very vague condition that it went into, and it was almost to the day. It was like exactly, 18 years as our years were but I did temporal flights for like 8 years. And those were, we'd leave at 7 in the morning and get back at 7 in the morning. You take 8 hours times those years, 5 or 6 days a week, and it adds up to 2 years. So I experienced 20 years, but because of those jumps in the time in those on the ship I worked on, it shaved 2 years. So I was taken in 82, and it was the year 2000. I literally remember the day I woke up and snapped out of it. And I mean, I don't know. At the end of the day, I'm speculating. I'm explaining the symptoms or the symptoms of a sickness, but I'm not, I don't have a laboratory to diagnose. So I'm explaining what it felt like, and that's just my best guess. And when I like I said, I've fortunately thousands of people have reached out to me with similar memories and say, man, I saw your interview and I think I went through the same thing. Can we talk? And I do those all the time. And it corroborates. So people that come through and seem like they have legitimate 20 and back memories that bleed through, that are old enough. So there's an age factor as well. The ones that are old enough, when they look back, I can always say, well, what happened, at this time in your life? And they go, man, that, it's funny. How'd you know that? Because my whole life changed that day, and because that's what it was. My whole life changed too. Like, it was like waking up.
Totally. I mean, I can't put into words just how believable your books and interviews. I mean, that's your, biggest asset, I would say. But what I meant about the time loop is just to make it more simple for people to grasp, because since you're getting re-aged at the end, it would kind of make sense for your consciousness to first experience the time loop and afterwards, go on about, and basically, in other words, for your 20-year and back to have been your first childhood, so to speak.
So that's it. In fact, that is how I experience it.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was taken and I was put into the 20 years, I woke up with amnesia. I woke up in Inuit, California, and with amnesia, but I experienced those years first and then went back. So it wasn't that I experienced them kind of haphazardly. The 20 years that I was gone, I experienced first. And then when it was over, I woke up in my, like the experience, what do I call it? What is the word? So the phenomenon of being gone. So let's say if you just got up and walked out of that room you're in right now at this moment and left and came back 10 years later, and the room, it was exactly the same as if you never left it. You would have that there'd be a phenomenon there where you'd reacquaint with that room. Oh, wow. I could see all the books on the shelf. You'd go through the books. I forgot about this one. Oh, wow. Like you would have that nostalgia feeling. There's a phenomenon there. That's what happened to me the next morning when I woke up. They took me in the middle of the night on a Thursday, and I woke up Friday morning and I looked around and I legitimately felt like I hadn't been there for 20 years. I was completely disoriented and I had to reacquaint myself with not only my room and my mom and dad and sister and a dog, but school. I went to school. I was kind of lost and I didn't know my way around the school anymore. And it had only been one day in our timeline. So that was how it felt. Like I said, I can only describe the symptoms that I went through. But now that after I got the recall event where I got my memories back, that's how I experience it. So 9 years old is 70 years ago, 70, 80 years ago for me. But 11 years old is 50 years ago for me, or 39 years ago for 40 years. I hate doing math on the fly in front of the camera. I'm not good at it, but you understand. So for me to think back and remember being 11 years old, 11 and 12 years old, that's about 40 years ago. I'm 51, I'll be 52. That feels like a 40 years of memory. For me to remember 9 years old feels like very far. It's unbelievably far, because the other 20 years is in between there. Like that's how it unfolds in my timeline. Like that's how I experienced it.
Mm-hmm. So the other basic thing that I would like to, maybe shed some light on is the dilemma whether you were a clone or not, or do you think it's another gray area? Because even in your book, at one point you say, you were told by different people, different, opinions. So in the end, which one do you tend to pick?
On Earth, I was referred to as a clone. So I was referred to as a clone in that time. Like in Inyokern during that program. We were kids. We were literally being tortured. And he said, you're clones. This is your lot in life. But that doesn't mean that he was given the truth either. So clearly we were more than that, because I attained the memories and I remember a great deal of them. So clearly it was more than that, that if I was a clone, there would be, I wouldn't know what the clone went through. Right. So, right. If we cloned a pig and took it away and it lived a life in the tropics and the other one lived in the north in the winter, they shouldn't experience it with each other. They should be no contact there. So if I was cloned, part of my consciousness was taken and drove the clone. And the exact words the ETs asked me is, we want to borrow your consciousness. Yeah. So that was their exact words. I remember that verbatim. I think it was a version of cloning. I think that that's kind of key to it. I think there's more than one way to skin that cat. I think that there's more than one technology that achieves the 20 and back tech. And I could be totally wrong about cloning. It might have been me that got age reversed and they just have the time travel aspect classified. So they say clone because they don't want to give away that there's time travel. Like, how could it be the same person and we put him back, etc. The other reason that supports cloning is that I woke up. So I was taken on a Thursday night, I think Thursday, April 15th, 1982. That's the best I whittled it down to. I was taken on a Thursday night and put through into an extraterrestrial base somewhere, ship base, whatever. It looked like a mountain. It looked like an underground cave system. They did tests on me. They were greys and reptilians and insectoids walking around. They did tests on me. I passed their tests. They said I had the genetics to do their program. They asked my permission. I thought I was helping. They made it, they sold it to me basically, and I agreed. Then they put me down for a procedure, and I woke up with no memory of who I was. I woke up with complete amnesia. I could barely speak English. So as if in a new body, right? Cloning. And I was in Inyokern, California, at the Inyokern Air Base, and I went through the remnants of the grill flame remote viewing classified program into psychoenergetic research. Then I lived for 20 years. I had no memory of where I came from, mom, dad, nothing. I had no memories of that. When I would draw in Peru, I would draw with crayons. They gave me paper and crayons to bide my time when I was a kid in Peru. Mm-hmm. And I would always draw my house with the long driveway where I grew up. My house I grew up, I would always draw a house with a long driveway. And I didn't know what it was. And they were like, why do you always draw the same thing? And I said, I don't know. I didn't know it. But every time I drew a picture, any old picture, I ended up putting a house and a long driveway on it. So there was a residual somewhere in there, but I did not remember it. So those memories were blocked. When I finished the 20 years and went back through the procedure to go and return, I woke up without the 20 years of memories and all my memories back. So it was, when I look at it that way, I say, well, I had a body that went to 10 years old. They took me out of it, put me in a blank body, and I went to 20 years. Then when they put me back, and all those memories were waiting there. Mm-hmm. So that's why I really theorized cloning in the first place, was when I thought about how did they put the memories back? How do they take the memories out of you and put them back in the same body? It didn't make sense. So because they were gone, they were definitely gone. They were blocked in the first place. And from what I remember of the process of blanking my memories at the end, it was very complex. It was like different booths in like an arcade, and you would sit in those big arcade games you sit in, and I would sit there and watch a movie and be drugged. They would use long needles and they were stimulating different parts of my brain. They were targeting, and then I'd sit through like an industrial grade hypnosis movie with loud music, loud sounds in one of these booths, and it would go on for an hour, however long, and then they would take me out and set me down and then give me another dose, and they would attack a different part of the brain and put me in a different booth. And so there wasn't just one thing that they were erasing. They were trying to. So I don't know, man, really the extent of that technology, if they were giving me memories back or if I was a clone. I just kind of postulate it for the audience, for people that are listening to this, because I'm trying to make sense of it too. And I think in the future, my testimony is gonna be valuable for that reason. So
For sure. But in terms of regaining your memories, would you say that the biggest contributing factors were your affection for your girlfriend, or was it just the fact that those ETs taunted you at the end that you won't remember, or maybe the far side remote viewer that retroactively set in the seed that you would remember, or maybe like a combination?
I think it was a perfect storm. So I think, okay, either any of those circumstances would have helped me remember some of my memories. But it was a perfect storm of those things that all came together, along with, I have a natural ability for long-term memory. I have absolutely terrible short-term memory. But I have great long-term memory that's uncanny compared to other people that I speak to. I can remember a great deal about my childhood and my teen years. I can remember long-term. So I think it was a perfect storm of those things that all conjoined to where I have so many memories, and why other people aren't writing books that are linear like mine. So other books are coming out, but they're not. Very few people that have had similar service and have their memories back. And some of these guys are documented, and there's a great deal of testimony on their behalf, but they don't have linear testimony from A to B, from the beginning to the end. And so maybe the Farsight thing helped with that. Maybe I got my memories back on my own. Maybe I was somebody that was already going to remember 5 or 10% more than somebody else. And then the Farsight, I got an MRI scan on my head right before the memories came back. I think it was a perfect storm. I think it was the perfect ingredients of it. And it turns out that if you want something bad enough, the universe will work to make it happen. It will take time. And I wanted to remember. When I was leaving for months, for at least a month or two, I was aware that I was leaving. I was aware that my time was going to be up and they were going to put me back. They would tell us, you've only got a few months left. And during that time, I made up my mind that I did not want to forget, because I had so much that was undone there. You were on a schedule. It was like Roman slavery, where you could earn your freedom.
Mhm.
And I was on a trajectory to earn my freedom, and I got to earn the next bit of freedom. Like I was working towards that, and I got the rug kind of pulled out from under me when I was demoted. And because of that, I just felt like I had so much that was undone, that I thought, if I just had some more time here, and I'm going to remember this. And then I was motivated. I was deeply in love with a woman at the time, and I did not want to forget her. And that was a primary thing. Like, that was what motivated me. And I knew it was important. And at the time, I knew that we were going back. There were so many lies about what we were going to have at Earth, but because I had lived on Earth my first 6 years, I had to be quiet about it. But I knew what I was going back to. So like I said, most people are taken into the programs. They're taken and abducted, the same thing like me, and they go straight into space, and they tell them the Earth is gone. Everybody died on there. The Earth is, there was a virus or whatever it is. I think it's, poisoned atmosphere.
Neutron bomb, I think.
Yeah,
Something.
a poisoned atmosphere.
Yeah.
So there's people, but not many. They're living in horrible existences, and kind of the plant, what they say.
Right. But do you think that if not for the really low and scummy like actions of Koenig, was it? No, what's his name?
Koenig. So in the book, it's Koenig, but I want to say this, that in the book, that I don't really remember the names.
Okay.
So I picked random names and threw them in there. So a lot of names are different. Like Marie, that's not her name. The book, I changed the names just to keep, for the story's sake, going, and that is especially going to be the case in the next book. All the names are going to be changed because it's going to be an actual biography.
But you think, if not for his really like almost cartoonishly antagonistic actions against you, do you think you would have maybe pursued, like you would have fought to stay in that 20-year back just because of Marie?
So no, there is no staying. So it's etched in stone. When it's your time to go back, you have to go back. It's like a galactic law. It's on a higher level of law, where other like if they got caught doing that, it would be absolutely disastrous. You have to go back. You literally do. And so it's a very core law. So it's going to happen when you go back. So I knew that, but he, every now and then you meet a guy like that just enjoys ruining somebody's day. They just get off for whatever it is, for whatever deficiency in their mind, whatever deficiency in their childhood, or whatever enjoyment. But he was one of those people that if he could pull the rug out from under your day or do something that would ruin your day, he really seemed to thrive on that. And for some reason or another, he went after me. He didn't like me the most, and so he did that. He did very cruel things to her as well, and because he could. That was the thing. So, like, if that's the takeaway, it's that this civilization lives inside the Ceres planetoid and has interstellar flight and access to great technology and great ways of life that they are drawing up for us now. And they are not morally superior in any way, shape, or form. They were still very sick society. And and then he's proof of that. So that's why it was important for him to be in the book and tell what kind of person he was. And then he chose to be programmed to be a psychopath. Like he already had tendencies, and the job opening for a negotiation requires a psychopath. So he went in and got actually trauma mind control. He took and got mind control programmed to be even more psychopathic than he already was. And so he's a very dangerous person. But that's the kind of person you need when you're doing negotiations with a strange species, with a hawkish, aggressive species. You need somebody like him, and that was his job. So that's what he did.
Yeah. I'm curious, but you don't have to answer whether he was pumped up with black goo.
I don't remember anything about black goo. When we were up there, there was AI. My understanding is that the people at the top of the government had AI, and that the rest of us didn't use it, or that there was a version of AI that there was an administration. So the captain reported to what was above him, a colonel or whatever, but at the very top of the government, it was a Führer, and they had AI. They had the naked AI, like the real one. Like, we don't have AI yet here. Like, publicly, the Chat GPT AI isn't real. It's a very watered down version of what AI really is. And they had the real one, and we were all aware of it. So the other AI was they didn't use it much, as much as you would think.
One of the most, just let's say, chilling quotes in the book was early on when the father of the Illuminati kid who kind of condemned you said that, well, we can give him to our friends. We'll find use for him in the breakaway. He'll learn humility. And did you actually use the term breakaway?
I believe so. So at the time, so this is a great question. These are great questions because you read the book, and I never get to talk about actually verbatim the book. It got edited. There are scenes in the book that are very not as accurate. They happened, but they're not as accurate as how I originally described them, just because of the editing flow, the way that the editing happened. So the whole book got edited. So it was a cafeteria. It's an old school. I went to Lincoln Consolidated Schools, and the building I was in third grade was the first consolidated school in America. So it's a historical school, very old building. And in the bottom downstairs, it's a cafeteria, and they'd set up the tables in a big U shape. So you came in on one door and you'd walk through rows of the cafeteria tables, and they had science fair exhibits on each table. And I was bringing mine in to set it up. There was nowhere to set mine. I was late that day. And so I had to set mine up in a classroom across the hall. And, but I walked the U, and then he was there with his dad. And I was leaving to go back to class because it was the first, like, they gave me an hour in the morning to go down there and set up. And I walked by them, and they were having that conversation, and it sounded like breakaway. I thought, I never even heard that word before. There was a word that they said that sounded like breakaway. And they were talking about me specifically, and I pretended to not notice. right? Because I was, I don't know, maybe I wasn't afraid actually. I was still very cocky kid. I was still, I just kind of gingerly, I was like, he didn't like me. I was like, sorry, but he wouldn't accept my apologies either. So that was kind of on him. Um, that's a whole different thing. But I remember that I did try to be friends with him after a while, and he just wouldn't do it. They had that conversation, and the word breakaway, the feeling you get when you first hear the word breakaway, how that word works is kind of how it felt like. So that's what I'm remembering, not the word itself.
Yeah.
When I wrote that, but it easily could have been breakaway, and that's what it sounded like. They had a comment. He said, you need to learn to manage your resources better to the boy. And he said, he doesn't deserve that. He doesn't deserve that. And he said,
So
well,
he
you need
knew.
to learn. Yeah, he knew. Oh yeah. When
Although
I
he
got
was very
back, he
young.
knew. Oh, when I got back, he knew. So I
Wow.
think he'd already been through one. I think he'd already done a 20 and back. And because he was like an adult and
That
had his
explains
memory.
his psychic powers, yeah.
Yeah, like he already did a 20 and back as a very high ranking person up there and came back into his young body, and he had the knowledge. He retained all his knowledge. There was no memory wiping because that's how he behaved. And after I got back, after it was all over with, he had pity on me. Like he could, like, I think he was reading the reports. I think he had access to see what was going on. He was definitely in the know of things. And then there was another boy that said the next day, and so this is like the following Wednesday. So I was taken on a Thursday. The following Wednesday was the talented and gifted class was Wednesday mornings at 10:30, I think, or 10 in the library. And we're there, and he said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah." And I still was playing hard, I was like, "Yeah, why?" He's like, "Well, I heard somebody said you had amnesia." I said, "No, I'm fine. I was just kind of like waiting for the attack from him." But his demeanor completely changed, and he was empathetic for the first time ever. That he was like, and then another boy walked up at the same time and said, "Did that happen? Was that real?" He said, "I remember." He said, "Yeah." He's like, "Yeah, I saw you," and they became friends. They were like, "I'm going to talk to you later about it." Like there was a boy that was taken that was not a slave role. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like he went in there and had a career, and he came back and he got his memories back. So people that do well retain their memory. But I remember that conversation, and there was another girl. There were 5 or 6 of us sitting around. It was a strange conversation, and he said later on, at the end of class, he said, "You make a difference, Tony." He said, "You make a difference."
The Illuminati
And
boy said that.
yeah, he said it to me because there was a girl that was asking about it. Well, what about me? What do I do? Because he said to that boy, when he said something, he said, like, "You did good. You made a big difference up there, and that's all that really matters." Is if you show. And he's like, they were having a conversation, and a girl, her name was Elizabeth. It's funny, I've never really talked in depth about this conversation. I've mentioned it in the past, but not a great deal. She goes, "What about me? I want to make it." He said, "You don't make a difference." He was very blunt and honest. He's like, "No, you don't. It's not what we're talking about. Go away." He was like rude. He was a very rude person. To put it bluntly. And we were kids though. So what kids aren't rude? But he was another level. So he said that there, he snubbed her. And then later, after that was all done, he said, "Tony, you make a difference." He said that to me, like he understood, like I believe he saw a report after I went and I came back that his dad said, "Look, here's the report of that boy. Here's what happened to him." Like he saw a summary of what happened. So he was aware. He's out there now. He's got a family. I found him. I haven't spoken to him, but he's alive.
Yeah. I believe that what the Illuminati boy said is in keeping with the religion that the captain of the Max van Laue ship said that the religions he subscribes to says that there are these chosen people or what have you, and he believes in fate so strongly, right?
Yeah, that that they believe that the universe works completely differently than how we believe it does, which is true. Kind of true if you think about it. Sorry, I saw this. And then, I mean, that's kind of what I'm working on nowadays. Is I work in remote viewing and remote influencing, and when you really look at the research, that was done in Black projects around psychoenergetics and psi-ability, the idea that consciousness can change, that the universe changes to bend, that we don't bend to the universe bends to us. And if we're just don't pay attention, then we must bend to the universe. If we don't take care of what we're thinking, then the universe will bend us. So entropy wants to just get you out of there. If you're not going to do it, it's like, use it or lose it kind of thing. And that's really the nature of the universe. But if you consciously are aware that you have authority in the universe, then it will bend to your will, and it will bend to you. So that's kind of what the science shows. So, when from the small experiments, when we look at quantum particles and the awareness of, the quantum particles on the wall are doing one thing right now. When I look at the wall, now they're doing something else because of my awareness. So that's proven. And then you look at the psi-ability, really what they covered in remote viewing with Project Center Lane, all the way to Project Stargate. And then they classified it, and what the Soviets were doing with remote viewing, and what modern people are doing in remote viewing with the Farsight Institute. The science behind how all that works shows that consciousness is much more authoritative in the universe than what we're taught to believe. We're taught that we're inside the universe, and just bad stuff happens, and you got to deal with it. You're helpless. That's not the truth. And so the captain was aware of that, and he believed that people incarnate in certain levels of consciousness. They were fully aware. The Ceres Colony Corporation was fully aware of different levels of consciousness and of the human experience, and then the ET experience, excuse me. And they had classifications for people based on that. And
based on densities, maybe, or
well, we call it densities because of the law of one. They didn't call it that, but yeah, same thing. It's the same exact thing. Like, there are octaves. So if you take 100 people and put them in the room, they're not mentally on the same level. There might be equal people. They all have the same rights and everything, but mentally, some of them are very immature. Some of them are very mature. Some of them are very empathetic, and some are unempathetic. Some behave more like an animal, and a great deal of humans behave like just above an animal, and they don't have any planning for the future. So when they make decisions based on the next day or two, and they don't think about the ramifications a year down the road. And these are people that are kind of lower on the octave. They probably were an animal in their last life, their last incarnation, and made it to human, and they're new at it. And so you see really aggressive behavior. You see criminal behavior, and animal behavior. Then there are people that have been incarnated as humans maybe several times, and have learned to plan things greater into the future, be more empathetic of the human plight. And these are people that are kind of an octave or two higher, still humans, still living the same life. And then there are people at the top that are like lucid dreamers. There are people in the world, there are people that are running things that are, whatever they want just magically happens to them. They're like lucid dreaming. Their life is, it seems easy to us, but that's not the right term. Their life is of their choosing, and things happen what they choose. And so that's a consciousness thing. And then they will go to the next level of human, which would be one of the ET species of human, or another species that lives longer than us. Instead of 100 years, 120 years, they go 500 to 1,000 years, and that's the next level up. And then again, that's an octave where they will start out still behaving like a human and not behaving like the rest of those species. Do you understand? So the Ceres Colony was well aware of this, and they had classifications for all of those subhuman, human, metahuman, uberhuman, ultrahuman. I forget what I forget really, but it was something along those lines. And then after a while, when they left the human octave, it was based on data that they shared with each other. And but there's more than that. Like I said, when you're mindful of your thoughts every day, the universe will bend to your will, and it will become like you're lucid dreaming in your life. But most people we're being kept down too. That's the other thing, is the people that attained this long ago have done a great deal of work to bury these practices.
oh yeah,
I forget how we got started on this subject.
no, I think you answered it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure all these races, like the Greys and the Draconians, and even Anunnaki, have been using us, I mean, hybridizing with us basically as a means for them to ascend, because they have, some of them, not of, like, have destroyed their connection to source. I mean, that's the only reasonable explanation for their, glomming out to us. Also, the way that the owner of that Seattle farm or house, manor, asked you if you believe in God, and then when you said yes, he said, "We're gonna take care of that." I mean, why would he do that unless he was part of this anti-Christ movement, right?
Well, he was a practicing Satanist, so it was a different conversation for him. So that was Inyokern. When I first woke up in Inyokern,
Oh,
I
okay.
got it. Do you remember how you got here? Do you have any brothers or sisters? Do you believe in God? That was my medical exam, like the very first, within the hour after I came to consciousness, after I woke up after being abducted. So without any memory, I woke up with amnesia, and that was the beginning of it. The guy in Seattle said, "Do you believe in God? Then have your God come and save you right now."
Right.
He said, "Have your God come and set you free. Go ahead." And he said, "You're going to do this, or I'm going to put you on the table, and you're going to be dead right next to that boy. And it means nothing to me. You're the dead." He referred to everyone as the dead, except for himself. Except for the people in that fraternity, they see us all as the dead. When you look at it, when you see references of the word dead versus that references of the dead in movies
Mhm.
that ascribe to the entire culture, the Walking Dead, the dead. I mean, Ready Player One, they were all dead people in the one thing, and they were the dead. That's what they mean for the average person that doesn't keep their memories, that doesn't maintain their life. They're just walking dead. So that's what these people in this fraternity, this satanic worshiping, sacrificing, human ritual sacrificing fraternity. It's not even a religion. It's not a religion. It's more like a fraternity. And but they refer to the people, everybody else in the world as the dead. So that's how he referred to me. And he said, "Look, you're the dead, and you're going to go." He said, "If you believe in God, go ahead and have your God come and save you. Have God come and strike me down or rescue you. Do it right now. Do it. Let's see it. Let's see your God." And that was his attitude. And I knew that. I said this in a book. I think I said in the book that at the time it was made me angry because I knew that he was an adult that was taking advantage of the fact that he had more knowledge than I did. And when I was an adult, I would easily be able to have a battle of wits with him and beat him. I saw him as somebody that I could debate with, but I just was too young and didn't have the knowledge, and I knew that. And it was like he was kicking a kid mentally when I was down, and it was very upsetting.
Mhm. And but just before you got to Seattle, there was that time when you got put on that train and without even supervisor. And is that the time where you would have been most able to maybe make a run for it? And is it just that you didn't even have the will at the time to do it?
No, so right. So I've since found documents on what's called inescapable shock theory. Excuse me, inescapable shock treatments. You can look this up. I found documents on that. It was one of the first things they did to us in Inyokern, was lock us in cages that we couldn't escape and shock us until we gave up. And I always wondered why they did that, but it's recently, just in the last month, I found documents that said that it's called inescapable shock, and they did it in animals, and animals that were shocked but they could get out of the cage. They put them in somewhere where they got shocked and they could escape, and then not be shocked. And then animals that they put in and they couldn't get out and shocked them until they just quit moving and then let it go. The ones that were in the inescapable never tried to escape again, ever again. They would not try to escape. They leave the door open. The animal wouldn't want to leave. And the ones that got out would still try to escape the way that anybody else would, captivity. So that was what they did. So yes, I was programmed in that regard, broken in that way, to not try to escape. I still had thoughts of it though. I still wanted to escape all the time. And in that train system, that was very deep down in the earth. It was very far below a military installation, and it was completely guarded. There were armed guards. There was there was security. There was no getting out of that train. There was no getting, getting off at a stop and this like kind of making my way. It wasn't possible.
Right. I have to ask you this. You don't have to answer, but because I've interviewed him and he did say that he was with you at the manor in Seattle. Well, can you confirm that Joseph Powell is the other guy, the young boy in the ritual?
Joseph Powell told me once, so I'm not going to speak for him.
Okay.
I don't believe he was the boy, so the years don't add up. So it was before he was not even born yet. I don't believe. I forget his age.
It's true. Yeah, he's younger. Yeah.
1 or 2 years old or something. But he said he was in the Montauk experiment. So the Montauk chair is people that can go into like Quantum Leap, the TV show. People can put in the kids in the Montauk chair could leap into other lives and experience them for a few moments. So that may be something, but I don't believe he was that boy in Seattle at that time. But he's very adamant that he was there during that time. And when you look back at it, if you give my testimony to a time traveling agency like the Montauk chair, so we have a chair that we can put a kid in and go back and that kid can go back and jump in the body of somebody at any place in time in the future or the past. And you read my book, like, let's go put him and see what's going on there with what's Tony's account. Let's go, where are we going to put him in Tony's account? And so that would be a point of curiosity to some, if I had that chair, for instance, like, what is your target? Well, if you pick a target to go look at. And so that, I'm not saying it's not possible, but he wasn't that boy at the time.
So he had a different face. You still remember
Yes.
the original face? Okay.
Vaguely. And the kid didn't like me. And I believe he was older than me. Like, there were 3 of us. There were a blonde girl, him, and me for the 2 weeks, for about a 2-week period in Seattle in the beginning, in the end of 82. So probably December of 82 is when this was. It was the holidays. And the girl I remember, and the boy was had black curly hair, if I'm saying that right. And anyhow, he was just older. He was bigger than me, and he was a year or 2 older. 10 years old, a year older is a lot difference. And he was a year or 2 older, I believe. He was from somewhere else, and he was very short. He didn't like me. Him and the blonde girl got along really good, and he didn't want me talking to her or them. You know what I mean? So I just minded my own business. And we were all in bad shape mentally. All 3 of us were in very bad shape after what we had been through.
Yeah, that was the roughest chapter to read, but afterwards you had a kind of happier turn where you went to Peru and said that you spoke when you were under the IV with the drugs. You said that you spoke as a medium with the dead and fluent Spanish as well, and only after you were given EMF protection. And have you employed that in your real life, like use that and seen for yourself, like the benefits? And yeah, would you recommend that?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I use EMF fabric all the time. I have a pile of it. I keep buying it. I have an EMF fabric silver mesh blanket, which was the same kind that I had there on that plane, and I sleep under it. When I sleep under that blanket, I dream in color, and when I sleep without it, I dream in black and white.
Wow.
So to put it bluntly, there is a difference, and other people I've recommended it to said the same thing. They sleep much better under it. We are absolutely being bombarded with electromagnetic what's the word, pollution.
Yeah.
At some point, there's going to be the same way that we have noise pollution and light pollution and actual pollution. We're going to have EMF pollution that it's going to have to be addressed at some point. So teaching the remote viewing group. So I have a remote viewing group on my show, Talks with Tony. And when we do remote viewing, like I sat and did a session here in my office, I have my Wi-Fi router like right here, and a fan and a couple computers and fluorescent lights. So there's a lot of EMF in here. I tried to do a remote view and I got no data. I went through the protocol, nothing. And I thought, man, it's probably a lot. And I walked out in the parking lot. I went across the parking lot and dropped the tailgate on my truck and sat there with my pad and paper and started meditating again and started over. And lo and behold, I got data and I hit the target. I had a really good session where I actually was accurate. but the data started coming. Like I couldn't feel it when I was surrounded by in here where it's thick with EMF radiation. So yeah, I do that. I also lately did the grounding sheets.
Oh yeah.
So where the sheet is an EMF blocker, but it's got conductive, and then you plug it into the ground in the wall, and that grounds out. And that is an amazing. I sleep way better. I think it's very healthy. I think it's been a very big improvement. I miss it when it's gone. If I don't sleep in my bed, I kind of miss it. So all of
I
that
think
stuff, there's
should,
merit.
sorry. I think people should really lay hard into the grounding, not just do it like half an hour, but if they're really sick, they should just bury themselves for a few hours a day, and that would charge your body more than pretty much anything, I would assume.
The grounding blanket, you sleep on it all night. You can get any of them, the pillowcase, the sheets, and plug it into the ground, and it does feel like you're sleeping outside.
Mhm.
It's just a different, it's like you're in your bed, but there's a feel to it because you're ground.
And you mentioned that you have black and white dreams when you're bombarded with EMFs. Is that akin to like the way that people saw different colors in the nebulas outside the spacecraft?
No, I think that had more to do with your eyeballs.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's just some people are more, a lot of people are colorblind and don't know it. Many people are colorblind and they just don't know it. Like they still see the color, but it's very pale and not as vibrant as it's supposed to be. There is color acuity. In fact, I met somebody once that was a very high paid, and what he did was deduce color for automotive paints. And for automotive factories, they would hire him to come and figure out what was wrong with their colors because he had a gifted eyesight and could see way more colors. Some people could see way more colors than others. And so that was the same deal outside at the nebula. I saw red and gray. And I think I saw a tinge of some other, a tinge of something else. But some people reported seeing 5 and 6 colors. So it's just your eyeballs, human eyeball. And a lot of people reported seeing no colors. And when they looked at the nebula, because of the sheer size of the cloud and the stars that are shining inside of it, the size of it, that it takes on, what is that word? What do they call it? Like a prismatic effect. But you kind of look to the side and you can see things. When you see it, and then you look at it and it disappears. And you look away and you can see the red haze in your corner of your eye, and then you look at it and it just looks gray. It kind of does that. There's a real effect to seeing a large nebula.
Mm-hmm. And you only dealt with Americans to begin with the first few years, and do you like have a name for the original faction that took you? Because in the end you ended up with Nachtwaffen, but do you know like who sold you to them?
So I was privately owned. So yeah, the guy in Seattle owned me. So I was privately owned and rented out to probably the CIA for Peru, for my service in Peru. Then I went back to Seattle. I was privately owned. And then I was sold off to some company on the moon and then taken to Mars. And we were being leased by the Mars Colony Corporation. So it was the Mars Colony Corporation was paying a military contractor to have us come in as an experimental support force for their soldiers. So they were Mars Colony Corporation soldiers. And then we were a subcontractor in some company. And let me turn this off. And as a experiment to see how how effective, absolutely minimally trained and minimally equipped soldiers could be in conjunction to soldiers, the real ones on the battlefield, the super soldiers. So I hate that word anymore. It's played out. They're beating the word super soldier like an old dead carpet. So
True. But would you say that the hierarchy that the Gray told you about in the aptitude test room, that they have the manual labor, then skill labor, then engineering, then research and administration, then command, does that like paint the picture of the open type of jobs that you have there?
So each one of those categories had subcategories of many other jobs. So it was a category, but yeah, basically, that's what we were being tested for.
And at one point, the doctor in your current says that I thought you were all gonna become monarch sex slaves. So that he's saying that that's the lowest, that or manual labor, I guess.
Yeah,
And
no, he said sex. I forget what he said. Beta or something like it, they were the Greeks. They were in Current in that program. The positions were classified in the Greeks. You know, alpha, beta, gamma, theta. We went into theta, the theta program. So, category, and he said he didn't think some of the kids didn't. Some kids went to a different program, that was remote, more different psychic abilities. So everybody has psychic ability. Everybody, you're alive, you're conscious, you're aware of yourself. That therefore you have psychic ability, but it manifests in different ways. So the same way that people are. You know, if we're all surviving on an island together, yeah, like the Survivor show, some people are better at fishing, some people are better at foraging, some people are better at building the fort. And that's just natural ability from your combination of experience and genetics. And so psychic ability is the same way, the exact same way. In the remote viewers, some people are better at articulating what they see in words only, and they can't draw a picture. And others don't have that many words and they draw a picture. And so everybody has the ability, but they have different gifts and disadvantages. So
yeah. But the way they did it is all backwards, because had you known that you were even able to like land a really cushy job, you probably would have put more effort, and the grade that oversaw you was really curt and unpleasant. So and you proved that you can get promoted, but the way they do it is really inefficient. Would you say that that's true?
I think they were very efficient as terms of the working day, keeping everybody efficiently their output. But slavery in general is obsolete. So no matter what, even if the world returns, there are more slaves alive today than there ever were. There are more people in slavery at this moment than there were when it was legal. If you go and read, most people are unaware of that. They think it's gone. It's not true. Slavery is much, much, much more of a problem today than it ever was. There are more slaves alive right now than there ever were. But it's also self-defeating. So, you know, the 1 in a million number, I don't know what it is, for somebody that's extraordinary. Like I said, somebody that has the gifts to do something that changed the world. So every now and then, one in so many people changes the world. And when you have a slave race, none of them change the world. So the world just, you stunt your growth of the entire species by having just a few people at the top and everybody else is slaves under it. You stunt the growth because so many things would have popped up that changed the world for the better. And so slavery in the long run isn't going to work out. It just really isn't. And that's what I mean by these societies having greater technology, and they're more efficient at getting a job done. But ultimately, they're going to get lapped by the free societies, the same way that the North outpaced the South in technology for the time that they were split. That the North got rid of slavery, and it was a period, I forget, for 30 or 40 years. They outpaced the South greatly in technology because they weren't enslaving anybody. People were working and had the freedom to pursue the ideas that they had, and some of them pan out. And you just need a few of those to pan out to change society for the better. And so that's where these are at. And I believe that there's a real push by the elites to have us return to slavery. Really, I mean, we are slaves now. And many people are debt slaves and money slaves, and you have to get up and work, and they're not pursuing what they want. And it's just shooting the whole mankind in the foot. So I don't know. I forget the original question, but that's my spiel on that.
No, it's good. But after reading your book, I mean, I don't consider, I have to not consider myself a slave, because that's true slavery.
Yeah, there's levels of it for sure. You know, there's levels of it. And you can talk to people that are economic slaves, still have a bout of freedom to where they're not uprising. So, but there are still a lot of people there. Like I said, there are more people today that are actual slaves that have no economic freedom, no freedom over their body, no freedom over what they're going to eat, what they're going to wear, when or where they're going to sleep, who they're going to have sex with, or how many people are, who they're going to breed with. They have no decision in that. And there are people, I forget what it is, 50 million or 50 million slaves currently. I used to have all the numbers, and 2 years ago I had it in my slide presentation, but 6 out of 1,000 people on the planet are living in slavery right now, either sex slavery or working in a mine somewhere, like the lithium mines in the Congo. There's a great deal of slavery going on.
Yeah, and I'm sure the number rises when you factor in SSP stuff. But have you seen Earth abductees that were actually in positions of authority out there?
So yeah, some people up there did have better jobs, but not in authority. Like on Ceres Colony, I'm talking only specifically about Ceres Colony Corporation, where I lived. The people that were really running the military jobs were locals. So they were people that were born there. They still did a 20 and back as life extension, but when they were done, they went back home to Ceres. That's where they were from. They weren't from the Earth. People from the Earth were given jobs, whatever you qualified for, but not of authority. No,
Right.
not of great authority. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's what I suspected. And about the Mars structures, the reason why they can't be seen like in the Google Mars is because they are manipulated like digitally, or is it that they are shielded, or is it that maybe it's in a different like frequency? I'm guessing it's the doctored part.
Wow, that's a good question. So there's a lot about the frequency thing, about things that if there's a vibe or a frequency that has to change. I'm not sure how that works. There is a factor to going into the space programs that has to do with your frequency, the frequency of your body. So I don't know if you phase out and become invisible. I really don't believe that. I don't believe that. I think that it's more of a term. You have to have the right frequency in order to use the bridge technology. So some people call it portals or gates or whatever. The ship makes a portal and bridge it. We call them bridges. It's called a bridge up there. The ship makes a portal or a bridge. It flies into it and comes out at another planet. And so your frequency matters in that. So not everybody can go through that. You would die. Some people will die in it. So that is what has to happen. That's the genetic limit on that. I could be wrong, to be honest, right? So that's just my impression of what that was. As far as the structures on Mars, I'm sure there's digital enhancement. There, you should be able to see, if you really scrutinize, you can see where the bugs have dug under the dirt and made tunnels. You can see it the same way that like ants in the sand, you can see where they're at. So those are on Mars too, but no one's going to give you any credit if you say that this is obviously a bug nest. But if you look around right around the just inside the equator, or not the equator, but the tropics of Mars, just right around those areas, it should be heavy with bug nests.
Yeah, I have to believe that they're manipulated, because you mentioned seeing those black jagged rock columns that when you asked, you got told that they were there for millions of years. So why wouldn't they be there in 3D as well? I mean,
yeah, it was a small place. Like if you think about looking at a park, like a playground size, like the size of a playground at a local park, that's what it looked like. And it was kind of like there was a rock wall around that was a circular wall that went like an impression, like in a crater. Imagine a crater that got hollowed out and they built rocks around the edge of it. And then they had rocks that were standing up in columns that they had piled up that stayed together that look unlikely. And they made it through the wind and everything. And some of them were tall, some of them had fallen over. But that's what they were.
mm-hmm. But could you breathe the air without the oxygen, or were you always receiving oxygen, like when you ran against that wall horizontally?
No, we were not. We wanted the oxygen. It felt a lot better. I believe that there was an implant. So when I look back on it, I believe during the original round of surgeries that I got on the moon, I went through a lot of surgeries. So it was like one after another. And I believe that they actually had hardware that they put in the bottom of our lungs that aided in breathing in a low oxygen or a toxic environment. And I think that we were rated about that. I think we knew it later on in Ceres Colony when we were in the low oxygen areas. We were like, well, I got the lung implant, and some guys didn't. But it didn't matter. It was about converting some gas to oxygen that kept you alive. The oxygen, the helmet was open. It had a little plastic, like a see-through ring around it right here, and it was open because it would spray oxygen. There were two little nozzles that would spray oxygen when we started running or exerting ourselves. You could hear it kick on, and it felt good. It really did. But we were breathing something else during that time while we were breathing the atmosphere. So that's probably the most common criticism I get. They go, yeah, right. Anybody with a science background goes, Mars, the atmosphere is 1% of what's on the Earth, and there's no way. And I'm like, well, that's what I remember, man. So I got to trust my memories. When I look up places on the Earth that I remember, they've been accurate. And so I got to trust the space ones too. That's what I remember. So I don't ever sit and argue with people. Like, if you don't believe it, you don't believe it. It's good.
Yeah, I mean, you're backed up by so many, especially with regard to Mars, and not just with the air that is thin, like 8,000 feet elevation or something on Earth, but also with all the creatures. So many have seen the exact same ones. And the one that you fought in the arena on the moon, was it one of the insectoids or was it one of the hybrids? What was it, the native Mars insectoid, or was it a hybrid?
Well, it didn't look exactly like the spiders on Mars. How often you get to say the spiders on Mars are like David Bowie? It didn't look exactly like them, but it was just like them. So it was a different version of the bugs, but it was a large spider-like insectoid. And in the back of my mind, I realized what I found. If anything, when I go back and find places that I remember, I always remember them as bigger. And then I go and visit them again. I go, oh, it's not as big as I remember, but it's big. So that thing I remember was being super huge, but I think it might have been skinny with just long legs. It had very long appendages, legs, and they were dangerous looking. So it was a very terrifying bug. But it was like a big spider that was that could pan out the size of a car, like its legs stretch out like it was big. And it wasn't the exact same thing that was on Mars, the ones that when I encountered on Mars, but it was, akin to that.
Yeah, because even on Mars they had all ships ranging from a Chihuahua, like you said, to like as big as you, or like the Harley Davidson, I think you said.
Yeah, like a size of like a big, 300-pound spider that could jump, and they all had scissors like mandibles that could scissor. Like they talk sideways. They didn't have this. It was all of them. They had a sideways mandibles. There was a mantis one, and even the little dog ones, they had long mandibles that would cut sideways. They were good sized little beetles. They had wings. They would both flutter their wings and jump away. They were very fast.
That was the most eerie chapter in the book. And you mentioned that the Marines had much better suits than you. It reminded you of Iron Man. And do you think like Iron Man is self-disclosure?
All of the so there's no doubt in my mind that Hollywood is totally comprised of maybe not the writers, maybe not the directors, and maybe not the actors, but certainly the special effects, the people that are doing the special effects. And I think that Hollywood has listened to us. I think that my interviews have been listened to, and things that I've described are turned up in Hollywood. The jumpsuit and the neck thing is in the Loki show. My description of the streets ended up in The Expanse. I went on the record before that, and then in The Expanse show, it was the exact same streets on Ceres Colony, exactly how I described over the phone to people. So I think that they spy on us. I think that the people in Hollywood have an eye on this community of the disclosure community, and they're watching us for ideas, and they want to beat us to it. There was a time for a couple years in 2018 or so that we were way ahead of Hollywood. Hollywood we were talking about technologies that Hollywood had never depicted, and then they caught up. And now Hollywood is trying to push the multiverse thing on us, which I don't believe that there's an infinite amount of universes, that infinite amount of Tonys are doing an infinite amount of things. Like in one universe, I'm dating my cousin. I don't believe that. I just don't. I don't believe the energy works like that. I believe that we have a timeline or two that are manipulated, and when you die, you can go back and change it. So it's like a choose your own adventure. Like when you're outside of time space, it actually sits still, and it's like a choose your own adventure book. So the timeline constantly changes. by nature, but that's because we all get to experience all of it. We're eternal conscious. We are eternal awareness, and so we get to go back and live lives that are pertinent to the one we just lived. Put it that way. But I don't believe in a super multiverse.
Yeah, I like to subscribe to kind of a moderate version, which is Ashayana Dean's, which she says that there's 12 possible versions of us at any time, and that they converge, especially because we're in the period of the apocalypse, into one main one, you know. And she's been on the money with the whole history of humanity. I link her playlist under this video because I really find it combines with the SSP better than any other source. That's just my bias, but you mentioned that you saw visions of being back in the barracks after the insectoid bit your arm off. And was that like a future vision? And is that why he also let the smaller spider chop your foot off afterwards?
No, it was going through my memories. So it was seeing the past. It had some kind of link that it made with me mentally, and it was looking through my mind into my memories to see.
Yeah, but you said the blood was pouring out of your arm in that vision. That's why I thought
right. I was, because at the moment I was standing there bleeding.
Oh, okay.
I was being held by I had a backpack, like I had a back, my suit had a pack on the back, and I was clinched. One of the bigger ones had me by that, and I couldn't move, and my arm had been severed and it was bleeding. And in the memory, I was aware, in the vision where I was back it was taking me through my memories, and I didn't feel the pain, but I could look down and see blood all over me. Like I was aware that I was bleeding, that I didn't have an arm, and that my time was short. Like please don't let me die. I remember I was panicking. I was still in shock of having an arm severed. So no, but it was looking through my past.
Mm-hmm.
And it was going through, it went all the way back to the beginning of Inyokern, and then it showed me my living room of my home that I was taken from at the very last thing.
Do you think that creatures that are so telepathic can dig through your memories without you noticing, and that he just let you participate that time?
Absolutely. So telepathy is going to be a big thing when we start to come in contact with species that have a great deal of telepathy. And in fact, our culture is based on privacy of thought across the board. Think about how many people have to get honest. There are a lot of people, and I don't want to sound sexist, but I think that, women at one time, in 1 week have a certain opinion, and a couple weeks later have a completely different opinion, and they're both valid. And men do it to exploit, but women do it as a course of business. And I think when we get to a telepathic communication of a society, people are going to have to become mindful of what they're thinking. You know what I'm saying? Like in 1 minute, you may have racist thoughts in your mind, and the next minute realize that those are absurd and you should never do that again. You should be able to entertain things in your mind. But when you're a telepathic society, somebody having racist thoughts shouldn't be, it's your thoughts, right? And I'm using racism as an example because it's a hot button. I'm not saying, but I mean, like imagine if somebody that has racist thoughts, right, in a flash of an instant, and they have their mind read. They should, the behavior as such in telepathic society is as to not hang that person as a racist for the rest of their life. You get what I'm saying? Now it'd be different if you're running for office and you're on the podium and you say a racist remark. Now and it didn't bother Biden at all. But so what my point is, our behavior, our very etiquette from the core of the way we behave is going to have to change once people that have telepathy are among us, because your thoughts are no longer just yours. So there's going to be a completely new, you're going to have to allow people to have weird thoughts and wrong thoughts. You're going to have to be mindful of your thoughts a whole lot more than you are. You know what I mean? From the moment you wake up to the day, like people tune in. And the thing is, we all share our thoughts at night when we sleep anyway. We all belong to a kind of a hive mind subconscious that we communicate in our sleep and plan the future out as we sleep. That's kind of a big function of nature. And we just don't realize it because we wake up and go, man, what was I dreaming? I forgot. Oops. Because it's what's going to happen next week that you got permissions with the people that you're going to be hang out with next week for. So that's how that works.
But at the same time, telepathy alone is not a cure-all, because you have all these regressive races like the Greys, who are expert telepaths.
The Greys are more of a hive mind that's dictated by an AI or a greater thing. So they've lost a lot of their individuality as a result. So all of the core functions of their life, they don't even think about. So that they differ from us completely in that way. They're a hive. Many species are a hive AI mind, and that push is going to come to us at some point. It's going to be on our desk. And so I think humanity will break into two different humanities: people that want to do that and leave the thinking up to a computer, and people that would rather be in charge of their whole life. I'd rather not be tied into a computer personally. And then telepathy, what people think, we're going to have to open up the possibility of changing our etiquette and the way that we think about things is going to have to greatly change post-disclosure because of that reason.
But also, as another example, that it might not be just enough on its own, the telepathic thing, is that your harshest treatment in the 20-year and back, at least in my opinion, was when your arch nemesis, Crony or whatever, said that they can read your thoughts as well, and they considered you a cavalier in terms of your behavior. That was an example of how they used artificial intelligence, I'm supposing, to read your mind in the negative way, right?
So I probably had something that's like akin to a Neuralink implant in those surgeries. Like I said, they operated on me many times and didn't tell me what they were doing. So I think that I probably had an implant that was monitoring my day-to-day.
Right.
And so when he needed a report, he could call up and report me, and then the computer went and looked through and made a determination. Like they couldn't go into the implant and just look at what I was doing, but they had an AI that did it, or a department of the military that they said, hey, this guy's acting weird, check him out. And so they go into that implant and do a search and see what was going on. And I was becoming confident. That was what that was. I got in trouble for displaying cavalier behavior. I was in love. I fell in love.
Yeah.
So I had confidence all of a sudden. And they couldn't have that. So they put me into another round of programming that made me afraid of everything. I saw spiders everywhere, and it made me just afraid. It was like artificially induced fear, 24/7, like artificial anxiety. They gave me artificial anxiety is what happened.
So is that mutilation thing? See, that leaves you the worst off, I guess, seeing people get mutilated. That's what the Draco use as well.
Yeah, that was a very difficult thing to go through. So that puts you in a state of shock, and then you're totally defensive mentally after that. So I think that's why they do that.
Yeah.
They showed me clips of people being butchered, women and children being chopped up by first person by people with machetes, and I was put in a state of shock. And then it addressed me, being talked to me.
Mm-hmm. And you also mentioned that they had like specific tailor-made abductions of sculptors in Ceres because they wanted those. They commissioned those huge horse statues. And do you know of any other like one-off abductions like that? Like maybe other types of art?
No, but I'm sure it happens all the time. I'm sure people that have an outstanding career on the earth get abducted into these programs so that they can go up there and do the work. If you're a gifted painter and they need some painters, they'll come down and abduct the gifted painter. Like I'm absolutely sure that's how it works. The earth is a resource pool for not only us but the local species, the Orion group, but other groups that come through. The earth is a genetic farm. So they can come down and get people to serve as labor. We're basically robots, like we're programmable, we self-heal, and we're very good at what we do, and we can figure tasks out. So we're much more economical than a robot.
So how many of these main characters in your book have you been able to identify in your day-to-day Earth life? And is there like a pattern that you've noticed about them?
Maybe 3 or 4 of them. And there isn't really a pattern. There's a real phenomenon of people that find each other, that knew each other up there. There's like happen stance. There's a phenomenon of that. So, but not too many of them. And I had more people call me and say that I'm Maria. There for a while, it was like, I quit talking about the whole love story aspect of it because I would get a couple girls a month saying, "It's me, I'm her," and I'm going, "No, it's not you," like, and then they get mad, and that's it. But that was a real thing. Like I was being that they were inserting themselves into it as they were the one. So that's a real phenomenon there, but no real pattern.
That was my favorite part, though, the love story. But I wanted to maybe take a dive into the technology just to give a glimpse and as to how it probably will look in the near future, and also maybe inspire some of the designers as to how it controlled out there. So you mentioned that the tablets tracked your eyes, and privately you also told me that they were holographic to a certain extent, right? Their tablets.
Yeah, so there was a 3D effect on the phone and on the tablet. When you looked at it, it looked like it was about an inch tall, maybe an inch and a half out, standing off of the screen. And it was clear. They were clear because staring at a clear screen doesn't damage your eyes the way that staring at a screen will damage your eyes that we do. So they were clear, and they had eye tracking so that you could just, wherever you looked, you could hover there for a little while and it would select. It was weird, but and then they had their own apps and things. They worked a lot like ours. We're getting close, really. They're releasing technology very quickly that mirrors what we had in the space program back in the 80s, or excuse me, back in the 90s. It was the 90s for me when I was up there. So they were way ahead, but we are getting leaps in technology, and I think it's going to happen very quick when they finally do disclose.
Yeah. What about, did you ever interact in terms of touching it, or did it even maybe sense it a few inches away from it, so it was kind of 3D?
No, so I had a pad that my workstation was basically a touch screen. It was a smaller, 12 by 10 touch screen, and that was my workstation. The difference between that and the touch pads that we use, like an iPad, is that it was fast. It was extremely. It would never. It as fast as I could type, it would
Nice.
work.
Yeah, there's a
So
latency with the iPads.
yeah, there's no latency in what it was instant. So it was fast. I got good at typing certain numbers very quickly because of that, and there wasn't latency. I don't remember any latency at all.
And you mentioned that on the Blitzbus, there were keyboards that contain whole words. Is that what you meant? Instead of letters that they have
So
German?
yeah, well, the reason is because we only had so many things that we had use for. So they were very industrial. So you couldn't get in there and just start hacking the mainframe because it didn't have the ability to do that. It was only for the jobs that you were doing. So it was very industrial, the software.
And your wristwatches, for example, on Mars, you said that you can even read messages on it, and would it come out like on a hologram, or would you actually look at it?
It was just a flat screen. It was
Okay.
just a flat screen on our wrist. There was a readout that the suits had. And the first missions, like, we didn't have them, and then we got them on the second. Like, they were seeing how effective we were with and without those.
Oh,
And
right.
then we got them, so and then we would have more things. The next mission, it would do more things. Like, they were giving us the map and the waypoint and everything.
Mhm.
But they weren't super fancy.
No.
No.
But also in terms of VR, you said that they can be used also to see like a screen that only you can see. So that's actually augmented, I think. So you can see past it's not opaque. But those screens also could work independently of the VR.
So the bridge crew on the Max von Laue on the ship, they each had, and the VR didn't strap to their head. It was an arm that came over the chair, and then they brought it down, and they could hold it fast, and they could move with it. It would move with them. But they had a blank curved screen in front of them that looked like a computer screen that was shut off, and they were touching them. So that was their interaction.
Cool.
And so they could see what was on their screen, And maybe if somebody else is like, hey, look at the, like, everything was turning on and off and then whatever was on their screen, the captain could put any of their screens on the main screen. There was a main viewer. It was just like Star Trek. There was a big screen main viewer at the end of the room, exactly like Star Trek. It was just like that. And he was in a captain's chair, sitting up on a pedestal, a couple steps up. And there were like 20 people at stations like that had VR that were doing their jobs. And they all talked. It was a very social place. Like they all got along. They were friends, and like a class. But yeah, that's what I saw. That was the VR thing. Like I couldn't see what they were, and the captain could say, "Here's this," and he'd show it on the screen, and he was the one that dictated what was. He did not have a VR.
Mm-hmm. And the translators, you said they translated other people in their own voice and volume in your ear, and at the same time later you said that you received a pen-like device from the two Ceres colonists that you say that with this you can understand any language. Is there like a difference between the two?
So the implant did the translating, and it worked within range of a Bluetooth of where we were. I'm not sure. I don't remember the pen-like device. What part did I mention that at? I'm not thinking.
They were hyping you up for the mission. The two Ceres colonists. They said that.
So this was an external device that worked away from the network. So it was an external. So that was a mission that was to go to Chicago.
Right.
Chicago. Yeah, that they gave us a device to go down because we were going to interact with they call it EBE, extraterrestrial biological entity. They called them EBEs, and so we had that worked independent of our. Like apparently you had to be on a network for the implant to work. We were going into the field where there was no network, so that's why we had that.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, about the translation, in the case of the rat creature, humanoid, he came out a little weird with an accent, but
that's right.
You consider that wasn't necessarily a flaw. I mean, his flaw, but more of a technology issue.
Yes, they said that it was being researched, that they would eventually solve that. That they had, that they were going to be doing business with this species because they were coming of age. It was a planet that was on the cusp of getting interstellar flight. They were like, and but it sounded like he talked a little backwards. I don't want to say like Yoda, but kind of like out of place. The words were out of place. The translator didn't work right, and so he sounded strange in some ways. But I liked the person that he was. He seemed like a very honest person, and very I don't want to say humble, but like very easygoing, very honest person that was older, like an older guy that was one of a guy's guy kind of thing.
Yeah, they were hoodwinked, right? Their civilization.
Well, in that particular time, so we were only there for a few days, and but yeah, at that particular time, they were being set up to be ripped off. So it looked like.
Yeah. You said at one point that the people of Ceres were extremely proud of their 30-year war that they fought in the 1600s. And did you ever find out, I mean, do you have any inkling as to the races that they were referring to, and maybe the ones that that supported them? Because I'm guessing that they had someone like that too.
No, they made it sound like they had nobody supporting them.
Oh, okay.
You know what's interesting? So I researched the 30-year war after I got those memories back, because I really didn't know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I started looking. I was always looking for the artwork. It turns out the 30-year war began in 1600 to 1601, with a few things that happened. So right in there, and then it went to 1630, hence the name. And it was based around the Catholic Church taking power back from the Catholic Church so that they had freedom of religion in Europe, across most of Europe, or the Deutschland, which was Germany and Poland and Denmark, I believe, back then. Could be wrong. And they were very proud of that. But it turns out that Nuremberg, if you look, the Nuremberg, those paintings of the head of space, the big space battle above the city of Nuremberg was in 1575, I believe, 1570. So 25 years before this happened, there was a giant extraterrestrial space battle that happened in the skies over Nuremberg. And then all of a sudden there was a pre-war, and then the humans came down. And then 30 years later, the humans went to war amongst themselves and won. against it. So there was a lot going on right in that period of history that had dictated the policy of basically what was going to be in the whole globe. Because of Catholicism would have proliferated like that, have been unchecked, everything 100% of the earth would have been Catholic by now, or they would have been very bloody trying to do that. So the Catholic Church was almost totalitarian in its rule set. That no other religion was allowed in Europe. And so after the 30-year war, the Protestant religion and the Amish, coincidentally, were founded in 1630 or right in there, and began.
Well,
so that was a turning point in our history.
Yes, and the religions definitely, at least from what I heard, a species of aliens came up with each one, the major ones. And also about the Nuremberg thing, I'm almost certain that it's linked to inner Earth as well, because they had the only proof of inner Earth that we have with the civilizations there comes from Austria in the 1600s. That shows that they had trade with some of them, and it's probably what they were referring to, the ET influence. Anyway, the most interesting part in terms of explaining how time travel works in your book was the what you already referenced about the way that the ship would leave at 8 and in the morning, and then it would return at 7:55 in a certain spot that only the captain knew beforehand, because they might, for example, be taken hostage, and then it would be different. And my question was, could they use this kind of exploit at any point, or do they have to request permission from someone? And because it seems like a huge advantage.
No, my impression was that they were doing it on their own, that it was a secret, that the other colonies were unaware of the tech, of that practice, of what they were doing, and they were getting away with it. That it was a secret. Not all the colonies knew this, that they just experimented, breaking the law, the time travel laws which are enforced. And it's funny, it's another thing that Hollywood came out with after my testimony. But that they were getting away with it. So it was like as the maximum that they could do.
It was very creative though. And but that your extra hours there did count towards your 20 and back, because you said
that's right.
Yeah,
they added up over time. So it's complicated to explain to somebody that's A, skeptical, and B, not heard this for the first time. But basically we left at 7 and we left at say 8 in the morning.
Yeah.
And we returned at 7:55 in the morning, 5 minutes before, but 5 minutes away as fast as we could fly, which was sublight speed. So the light from us appearing was visible on Ceres. And so they would see if we came back to the correct place or not. And if we weren't in the correct place or didn't come back at all, they would scrub the mission before we left. And it was hence anti-telephoning. So they would do very aggressive missions, because if we made it back, they would know. And if we didn't make it back, they would save the ship and we wouldn't be lost. So that was a very, very powerful thing that they were doing. But if you look at the time, like I said, over those, it was about 8 years, 8 to 10 years. And I did it, it was been 5 years ago, I added this up, but it worked out to about 2 years of time over that time that I had lived. We'd go and live an 8-hour day, sometimes 6, sometimes 10 hours. It was different all the time when we were done. And we'd come back, and then I'd be back in the barracks at 9 o'clock. I'd catch a train and breakfast or whatever, lunch, and or do something and go back to the barracks. And it was 10 in the morning, 9 in the morning. So everybody else was still at the mine. Those guys weren't traveling time. So they would put me to work. I'd have to do laundry or mop or do something. And so I wanted to avoid going back. But at the same time, it was the end of my 8-hour day. I was tired. And so it was a weird lifestyle for me. And sometimes, a lot of the time, they made us go to school. So I went to a class. I'd have to get off the ship, and then it was in the morning, and I would go report to class. And I'd already worked an 8-hour day. So they were long days for that regard.
Mm-hmm. And you said that the Ceres Colony was sponsored basically by the group of Draco reptilians. And did you find a disdain for them in the colony? Because I heard that a lot of the Germans have the dislike.
They didn't talk about it much. There's a lot of disdain, there's the same stereotypes between species as there are between races down here. The same behavior, like, oh, those guys are always the same. So there was that. So it's a different form. It's speciesism, racism. It was the same. It was the same dynamic. So, but as far as is concerned, I really wasn't involved in a lot of those casual conversations at all. Most people, I'll say this, most people were afraid of the reptilians.
Yeah.
That it was, rather than hate them, they were afraid, I hope one doesn't come around here. And so that was more common than people that hated them.
So that was your take as well.
Yeah.
But the freakiest for you was the EBE5, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, that wasn't the freakiest. The freakiest was in the end.
The captain.
My return. No, my return at the end when I was when they sent me to be reprogrammed, when they kept programming me and they had the machine talk to me, whatever that was the worst. That was the worst interaction I had.
Well, I was gonna go into your new book, but I think it's too much, so I'm just gonna maybe continue another time. And so, maybe just to end this one, I was gonna ask, at some point, someone said that the consequences of you remembering will be severe, and they may even kill you first and not even slip you back into your Earth body. Is that just a threat, or is that a real possibility?
Can you give me a little more context? Do you mean me?
At the
Somebody
end,
said that about me?
Yeah, at the end, when you said that you will remember, maybe to the captain, I'm not sure, but they replied that they would kill you rather than allow you to keep your memories.
Yeah, I told the captain that I had seen. I paid hybrid psychics for a session, like as a novelty, and they told me I would remember. That I was the one that I was going to remember my time, So I went around and I told my captain privately. I said, he said it'd be very bad for you if you remember. They're not going to let you go back. They'll know if you remember or not, and they'll kill you, or worse. And I said, no, I'm going to remember. And so maybe that's why he deleted my record, and that's why they couldn't do that. So he knew and kind of did me a solid. But yeah, he said that, and that was the thing. When at the time that they put me into that place, into an office on the moon, on the backside of the moon, on a building that was on the surface of the moon. I had a corner office, and they were putting me through versions of trauma-based mind programming, and then showing me the end of my life. They put an implant, and then they were looking through my life in the future with some form of chronovisor technology, and coming up with a threshold or a number of lives that I would forget. And they never did it. And so they said, just take him and give him he's going to get a lobotomy. And I was going to wake up the next morning in Michigan as a cripple or whatever. And then when they got to the window to do that, when they checked me into the surgical area, they said, there's no record of him. So it doesn't matter if he remembers or not, just put it back. And the reptilian, my chaperone, said, look, this is your lucky day. And that was the last thing I remember. That was literally the very last thing I remember. And then I woke up in my bed back in Michigan.
But is that where you saw your possible deaths, and where you saw that the timeline?
I kept seeing my death over and over again. I kept remembering. So think about it like this. They put an implant in me, and rather than have it record, a very tiny, they put an implant in me, and rather than have it record my entire life, it only recorded the last 3 minutes of my life each time, because your life flashes before your eyes. So when you are aware that you're going to die, from what I remember, your whole life replays, and only the best parts, right? So you don't remember, but your whole life replays, and you kind of sit there. So rather than have a big pile of data, they only need to record those 3 minutes and then send that to themselves in the past. They can send messages into the future and the past. Like, imagine being able to text yourself in the future. How powerful that would be. That's what they can do. And so they would do that, and then he would change me again. He'd put me through another round of programming, and then he'd do it again, and he'd watch and then I would experience the death. I would experience it. I was plugged into the machine. And so I was living different deaths of my life and watching my life pass before my eyes. And you come back, it's like, nope, you still have your memories back. and it kept getting worse. He wanted me to not have my memories. I wanted me to have a good life, right? And it kept getting worse for him. Each life I was a little bit better. And then he was like, oh, wow, we can't do that when he's successful. And, you know what I mean? Like, in one life I would die and I just was like, old guy in an apartment. The next life I'd die and I had a house. The next life I'd die and I had money. And the next life I'd die and I had, they were all things. And I remember one of the biggest thing was that the book being released. In all of the lives that they showed me that I hated, that were miserable, the book wasn't released. And in all the lives that were positive, I had released my book. So at the moment that we published the book and released it, it was a big weight off my shoulders. Like, it really was. And it has been. It's been very life-changing since the book came out.
You could see that many details in those.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of details I don't remember. But yeah, oh yeah. I remember the feeling of watching it. So that experience of watching your life when you die is solely unique, and it doesn't perform like other memory functions perform. It's your heartbeat. You consciously can breathe, and you can consciously not breathe. Like, you can forget about your breathing, right? So right now everybody's thinking about their breath or take, but most of the time in the day you're not thinking to inhale or exhale. It just happens.
Yeah,
your memory is the same way. And then you can consciously think to inhale or exhale, so you can consciously choose what you remember. Well, what I'm saying is the memory of death is unconscious. It's forced upon you. You're not looking for it. When you remember everything else, you're choosing it. So.
And lastly about this, that it also seemed like you were in real time changing just because you were seeing their reactions, your fate in those moments.
I felt helpless in the situation. Really, the process I felt helpless in it. But you know what? That is the exact moment that the Farsight Institute, that Janae
implanted. Yeah.
That's the very moment that she interacted with me.
And that's when the Gray registered those changes, and for the better in your case. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And he gave up. He was frustrated.
But yeah, we covered a lot, and yeah, I'm grateful. I've been really wanting to do this for a long time. So feel free to share if you have any new projects in the upcoming.
Absolutely.
Future.
I'm really working on remote viewing classes. We do targets together. We meet every Sunday. It's through my Patreon. There's a monthly fee there. It's kind of what I'm doing. My books are out, still doing well. I'm working on 2 more books. One is going to be called A Brief History of Remote Viewing, or something along those lines. And then the other one is going to be the story of what it was like when I got in this life, from the moment that in 2015, that I got my memories back till now. It's going to be that autobiography of what's gone on, and talk about the community and other people and evidence and kind of where the world is right now. Those are some big projects I'm working on. The Maple Street Learning Incorporated is my company, based on the learning techniques I remember from going to school on Mars. It's adaptive decision-based learning, and that's doing well. I have investors. I am seeking more investors for that to expand. It'll happen with or without the money. Money makes it happen faster. But it's a great buy-in. It's a very promising and education turns out to be a very lucrative industry, because the bar is set so very, very low.
Yeah.
That you really don't have to do well to do well. And I expect this learning software to be very good, very effective. We're doing that. We already have accounts with that, and that's kind of what my side job. I work half the day on that, and then the rest of the day on my talks with Tony. I do remote influencing classes on Tuesday. I do remote viewing classes on Sunday. They've been a success. And I put out shows too. I do interviews and put out a couple a month on my Patreon. So that's kind of what I've been working on.
It's awesome.
So that's what I do. And all of it, you can find it at TonyRodrigues.com. So there's my blurb.
No, yeah, I'm glad you're pushing for remote viewing. It's crazy to me how underutilized it is. You could basically find anything ever in the world if you just use a blank map.
So yeah, a little more to that. We do blind targeting, which helps. But what remote viewing really does is when you get to do a remote view, and then you write down what you got, the aspects that you got right on the target. It's uncanny most of the time. People do very well. What that does is that lets you know, out of all the voices in your mind, the thoughts in your mind, some of them are, they call it interpretive overlay or confetti, just not real. And some of them are actual data that are real, that are connected. The idea is to understand what that sounds like, what it feels like, to have the correct answer of your intuition versus the confetti. And so that's really the goal of the group, is to teach people to listen to their intuitive voice first and understand what that voice sounds like. And that remote viewing every week does it. And, you know, you can learn the remote viewing or take a 1-month class and get it. But if you don't keep doing targets, you don't form the neural pathways or build the muscle, if you will, of remote viewing. You have to keep doing it. And so that's why it's a weekly class that I do. And we do targets, and then they're confirmable, and the other people in the group, it's better when there's more than one person doing it. It's a lot of fun. It really is.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
I agree. So yeah, I think you did great, and hopefully we can resume at some point, maybe next year, with the second and maybe third book.
Absolutely. I'd love to. I'd absolutely love to.
Awesome.